Hey everybody, I have a great discussion for you all today. I'm joined now by the fantastic Nomiki Konst. Nomiki, of course, host of the Nomiki Show on YouTube and on Rockfin. Nomiki, welcome to the show.
Hey David, thanks for having me. You're fantastic as
Of
well.
course. Oh, thank you. So, you are one of my favorite guests, honestly, to have on the show because I feel like you're just really easy to talk to, and we can go across various topics really easily. But let's first start. So we're gonna get into your political upbringing, Fox News appearances, Joe Manchin for president, what that's all about, and as well as Biden and Democrats. But first, I want you to discuss Matriarch, and there's an event coming up, I believe, with Matriarch that you want to share as well.
Yeah. So for those of you guys who don't know, 2 years ago we launched Matriarch, which is an organization dedicated to helping working class women run for office at all levels. In 2020, we helped get one of our founding members, Cori Bush, elected. She, of course, is basically a Matriarch icon in that not only was she an organizer who just fought in every single opportunity she could for her community. She ran before, she was a nurse, and of course we see what kind of experience, lived experience and perspective she's brought to Congress. This time we are supporting candidates that are running from Congress all the way down to school board. And I emphasize school board because that's where the Proud Boys are organizing right now. And the Democratic Party is like MIA right now. Well, they have been, as we know. So we have decided, like, what is going to scare the Proud Boys? Well, we got to run a bunch of badass women who are connected to the community, who felt, frontline workers, nurses, teachers, Amazon workers, Starbucks workers. We know that everybody said that they supported them, but those policies didn't translate and are not translating right now. So we believe the solution to that is running more working class people, women in particular, who've also received 90% of the job loss in this economy. And it's likely most of these women are not going to be going back to work. So we're doing a training because this isn't easy. Running for office for the first time or even the second time, there's been a lot of lessons in the last few years on the left with people running for office, but there's also a lot of systemic barriers to working people running for office. So we have a training on January 29th, and it's all digital, and we are trying to make sure that the tickets are free for everybody, because that wouldn't help if it wasn't. And believe it or not, a lot of trainings are not free. Even if they are free, the tickets, it's cost prohibitive to get there, the flights, the hotels, all that kind of stuff. So this is all going to be digital. And we're trying to raise money for it because we still have expenses to put this training on. So by the end of the year, and we're hoping to raise $30,000. We're having amazing speakers and trainers, people who talk about political messaging. I think on the left, we're always trying to prove that we're right rather than appealing to hearts and minds. And there's a real psychology to that. How do you win somebody in the first 15 seconds, 30 seconds of talking to them and bringing them into your community? We talk about some of the systemic issues that women face when they run, whether it's just a certain type of attacks that progressive working class women face, or just institutional barriers and systemic barriers. A lot of running for office is based on raising money and being viable. Well, if you don't have money and you don't have access to wealthy people, it's usually more difficult. But we have strategies to help you get there, to make sure that big important people come and endorse, and you have a coalition around you. How to hire people, when to hire them, who's predatory. There are a lot of predatory consultants out there. What do you need in a campaign manager? What do how do you strategize your campaign? I think that we have a lot of lessons from our lived experiences in politics, because we're a collective of about 40 women in politics across the board who work through Matriarch on our candidates' campaigns. But it's important that the candidates know this, and their teams do too, because this is believe it or not, our movement is still learning, and it's important to have these trainings because the establishment does do some things right. They just don't do it for the right reasons. So we've learned from them, and that we're really excited about the trainings on January 29th. If you can contribute, go throw in a few bucks or much more. We're trying to get to $30,000. There's a link on screen. It's bit.ly/train women, all lowercase, and that's women, plural, WOMEN. And that's it.
And I'll link to that below the video as well. And yeah, you've spoken at length of the sort of recruiting that the right does, and and that clearly we have to combat that. And not just that, obviously the establishment, and they're always going to have a ton of money behind their candidates. So it's important to have organizations like Matriarch that are investing into people, that are supported, that are funded, that can actually put the proper investment into these candidates. So definitely go check out, support Matriarch. Again, I'll link to that below the video. Now let's start with let's start with your political upbringing. So this is something that I find really, interesting, because I had the complete opposite experience growing up. In fact, politics was not only not discussed, but was discouraged. Like, whenever I brought it up, my parents always told me, "Oh, it's a personal choice. Who you vote for is a personal choice. We don't talk about it here." So I really had zero exposure to what was going on in the political realm really until like my mid-20s. And part of that as well is I had the luxury. I mean, grew up middle class. We were comfortable enough that I didn't have to really worry about the day to day. So it was never really a part of my life until I began to actually invest and learn what was going on in the world. But you had, I think, a very different experience. So I'm curious about kind of your entry into politics, and also we'll get to various jobs you had and that sort of thing as well.
I came out of the womb with like a protest sign, basically. No. I did have really long hair, so maybe you could say I was like a hippie or something. I had like 9 inches of hair on my head. Yeah, I mean, well, first off, I think it's, one thing to note about your upbringing too is you are in Canada, and Canada is clearly not perfect, and you talk about this all the time, but there are some things that you guys get a little bit more than we do. So the material conditions don't always create a scenario in which you're like, you have to do something because there's no alternative. I think that's part of really the last 10 to 15 years of American politics and the left is folks waking up to the fact that our politicians and the Democratic Party in particular is not necessarily what they put themselves out to be. So I don't know, where do I start? So yeah, I guess I'm let's start off with the fact that I'm Greek. And if anybody has ever spent any time in Greece, everybody has a political opinion in Greece. They will not hold back. It can be very heated, but very rarely is it like super personal. The way that sometimes I think we have these interactions here where you just stop talking to someone or like they say, calm down. No, everyone's fighting all the time in Greece. All the time. It's just like a constant fight. Like everything, every dinner, they don't hold back. So I think some of it is just innate to my culture, and my upbringing. But my mom's side of the family, my grandfather was a political exile. He was a refugee. Well, both of them, my grandmother and my grandfather were, but he specifically was put on a hit list by Hoxha, who was I'll say totalitarian communist, because I don't think that, for folks on the left, we have to understand the differences between different rulers that, said that they were communists, but in reality they weren't. Mm-hmm. Hoxha in particular did stray from Stalin, and the CIA in particular thought of it as an opportunity to break through the Iron Curtain through Albania. And the area of Albania that my grandparents were from was southern Albania, which is on the Greek border. They were Greek minorities in that area because the borders were always changing. It's, I think to this day, still the poorest part of all of Europe. Definitely was then. I've visited. It is shockingly poor, and I've been to some very, very poor parts of the world. They escaped. And my grandfather was put on a hit list because he basically challenged some folks who wanted him to be a spy for the Albanians, and all he did was say, like, oh, you want me to be a spy? There's more to the story. It's a little bit more complicated. But bottom line is he was a political refugee. So in my mom's family, he just saw politicians as crooks. So it wasn't so much that you have a political opinion and you keep it to yourself. They were Democrats, my mom's family. But, they came over in that era where the immigrants that came over through Ellis Island and were refugees were Democrats. And as time goes on, sometimes people think that immigrants, they become more conservative as they start to make money. There's a little bit of truth to that, but mostly it's you're seeing the immigration laws change, and they're dependent on, do you have money to take to America? Do you have someone to sponsor you? And of course, that's a different type of immigrant that comes. And now it's, almost impossible to move to the U.S. without having a significant amount of money or sponsorship at the same time. So his side of the family, they were very politically thoughtful, but distrust of all politicians and institutions because that's kind of the world that they were brought up. And frankly, they were right. On my dad's side of the family was very political, but they were Republicans, like high-ranking Republicans. Like my grandfather was a lawyer, and his partner in his law firm was former Congressman John Pillion. Definitely not a Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, whatever. It was a different era, right? It was New York State, Buffalo. And he was my grandfather, I believe, was the chair of the Republican Party at one point. He was supposed to run for funny little story about how it all happened. But Pillion was supposed to go work under Nixon if Nixon had won against Kennedy. He was going to be the attorney general. And then my grandfather was going to basically inherit, because that's how Republicans work, that seat. And then what happened was Nixon lost. And then next time Nixon ran, Pillion had a stroke. And so everything just sort of didn't work out that way. Thank God. But the rebellious, this is important. My father was the rebel, and he was like, this isn't who we are. And he went to school, and so my dad he has 2 born again Christian family members, and he is an atheist. I think I'm even more spiritual than he is. He's a Bernie-crat. He does not have any time or energy for Republicans. He registered to vote in Arizona, and he was staying during COVID with my grandparents' house, my mom's grandparents' house, because he was like, we need to have the Democrats need to win Arizona. He's basically a resistance mom. That's what my dad is. He is a resistance mom. No, but
he's also a big Law and Order fan, by the way. I know that, right? So as am I.
Every night, bum bum. Yes, that's a thing. No, but I mean, being in that home, my father was really encouraging of me. Debating. He would pick a topic, and keep in mind I was very young, so he'd pick a topic and he'd say, at dinner, I want you to defend this topic, and now I want you to take the other side. And it really helped me kind of understand. And that carried on to school when I did mock trial. I did it in high school, middle school, high school, and college. It helps you kind of understand how the other side thinks. So that was important to him. My mom was involved in local politics. She ended up becoming a legislator in a 3-1 Republican district, was the first Democrat to win. It was a very rural district. She used to, I think 70% or 80%, whatever, would vote for her. And I think the secret to that was she just knocked on doors and talked to people. It wasn't anything, she had her beliefs, but people, when you have that human connection with somebody, I don't know if it will totally work right now, but at least back then, people are willing to kind of overlook some of the more culturally divisive issues. They knew where she stood on abortion. They knew where she stood on a lot of important issues that I think divide a lot of Republicans and Democrats. But she's a legislator, and she's a former teacher, and so I was around it. So around those years, I started to become radical Nomi and protest anything. It was the 90s, so what could a 13-year-old protest?
Yeah. But clearly, it was it was in your blood, obviously, and it makes sense that you would also be involved in this now. And you've had various positions, right? This is why I really enjoy your commentary and like your perspective, because you know the ins and outs of the Democratic Party. You know how things work. You fought against the goings on in the DNC and trying to push back against their crap. You really bring something that a lot of people don't bring, and that is simply experience on the inside that I think is useful for the left. There's a lot of people that have experience on the inside that end up being a part of the inside and working for them. But you're sort of a rebel in that sense, where you've worked on the inside, but on the inside against the established powers. That gives a unique perspective that I think a lot of people simply don't have because they don't have that experience. So that's why I really enjoy your commentary. But so let's do a little turn.
Can I make one point on that real quick?
Yes.
Very quick. We in left politics and independent media don't have a lot of that. So we have some of it. Dave Sirota's worked on the inside. Crystal Ball has, a few people. But in terms of the institutional Democratic Party, I do offer that. But then when you turn on CNN or MSNBC, they're full of people who have that experience. And I think it's an important thing for us to lean on is they do understand how the system works. Not that they necessarily talk about it on air, but they have insiders as commentators on cable news networks, and we don't as much.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. That's a very good point.
No, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, that's often the issue generally with cable news is that they have too much of that. But of course, as you point out, that it's too much of an insider perspective that is pro insider, pro status quo, as opposed to an insider perspective plus the knowledge that it is broken and needs to be fixed, or that is, it's not working, and we need to actually stand up for the working class. And obviously, that's what you bring to the table.